God is good, and with each day that passes brings us a day closer to the launch of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This is the Nathan Napalm channel, and if you are new here, please consider subscribing, especially if you're interested in Pantheon related content, old school MMOs, and all the RPGs. Today we're going to be looking at all the major updates that was presented to us from the roundtable. It was technically recorded in April but released to us here in May for the development of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This information comes to you from Kilson and Joppa Perkins, and there's a ton of beans, a ton of information, and it really gives us a sense of where they are at in development of this upcoming MMORPG world. So let's hear from our sponsors and then jump right into it. Before we begin, I want to give a big, major shout out to the members of Napalm. Thank you all so very much for your support. I could not do this without you. You are the sponsors of this channel, and if you would like to help support this channel, please click the join button down below for more information and a list of perks. And a very special thank you to the Lords of Napalm, Bounty Code, and Ray Cooper. Thank you for your highest tier membership. Okay, so Joppa sat down with Kilson recently, and they discussed a lot of things going on with Pantheon Rise of the Fallen and the development, about alpha, about all kinds of things, the Bard, the Necro. There's a lot to cover, so let's get going. First up, Joppa talked about a new mob entering the game for testers. Not to say it's the only mob entering the game, but a major one is the Wraith. Let's hear what he had to say.
So quick word about the Wraiths. The Wraiths, we've seen Wraiths before, like in Hound Cave, for example, but they were placeholder models, and also that was largely pre-refactor, and so pre a lot of the work that we've been able to do on the ability system and NPC AI and things like that. So what's exciting about the Wraiths is the visual change that they've gone through, but also, and most importantly, the behavior and the combat dynamics and abilities that they're going to be bringing to bear. So I'm really excited for our testers to wrangle with those in the next testing session, because they will be by far the most intense and advanced NPC encounters that they will have experienced thus far.
So exciting news that we had at least this one announced new mob being added to the current form of the game, and that is the Wraith, and I'm super excited about it because Wraiths should be able to do some life drain type abilities. They should only exist in really dark, damp places, avoiding sunlight, and of course I'm also hoping that they move through objects, like maybe even through walls, because I mean, they're spiritual. Why not? Let's move on to the next thing, Alpha, and how possible is it to get to Alpha in 2021? Let's hear what Joppa had to say.
That's not something you ever want to put like a strong pin on of, yes, we will definitely enter alpha this year, or no, we won't. And the reason is because the biggest factor in the timing of alpha is absolutely when the game is ready for alpha. We're going to be discussing this quite a bit in the next dev stream, actually, talking about the road to alpha a little bit more specifically and working through each of the components that make up that process. So we are, planning on talking about that more so and more directly. Alpha is critical. Alpha is absolutely critical for us. Content is always king. So when we talk about, what are the major things left that would prevent that or, dramatically change the time frame, content is king. We've got to make sure that there's enough content for 8,000 people to consume. I mean, that's a lot of what it comes down to.
Exactly.
So when you think about zone production, when you think about the different, model production, character art, NPC art, there are definitely some art-related aspects still left in the tank for us to get through as we kind of approach that milestone. But it's really, is the game experience there? Are all the systems there? Yeah, alpha's not launch, but we're dealing with a different mindset of fan and consumer in the current kind of era of things. And so we have to be very conscientious about, again, it's not launch. We're not aiming for like launch quality across the board, but we are aiming for a cohesive and fun and functional and polished to the extent, not ornamental polish strictly, but polished to the extent that it's a game that feels load-bearing for expectation. This is a game that I feel like is real. Like it's actually, something that I could see myself investing years of my life playing. Like the foundations of that are there.
Exactly.
And it's very hard to articulate, it's very hard to put that into words, but I think we've got a really solid beat on what's going to resonate.
So as per usual, and honestly, if you think about it, it makes sense. They're not going to promise 2021. Now, I'm super hyped that I think it'll be somewhere in that realm. If not released by the end of 2021, then I believe pretty early in 2022, just because after the refactor, things have just moved so fast. And I know sometimes it's kind of hard to see that when you're watching the development, but as someone who can publicly admit that I've played and tested the game, I can promise you that there is quite a bit of progress going on behind the scenes, and it's very exciting, and the tools and everything being put in place do make it, in my opinion, something that is possible, at least within the realm of possibility. But you gotta respect the way that they are approaching Alpha as being in a better state than most games launch at, to be honest, okay? You gotta respect that, because they don't want this to be a throwaway game that launches roughly and poorly and bad reception, because that's happened way too many times before with really great MMOs and completely decimated and ruined them. So let's get it right this time. This was the final vision of Brad McQuaid, and it's worth that extra bit of attention and detail to make sure that it's done correctly. Not to mention that sometimes, not saying that VR has admitted they're gonna do it or anything like that, but a lot of the times some of the NDA is kind of lifted during alpha, and that makes it even more critical. So you gotta understand all that, but let's move on to the next thing. New classes being implemented into testing, and let's hear what Joppa had to say about what new classes are coming, etc.
We have a small programming team, and so we do everything according to a specific planned timeline and sequence of implementation. The classes need to wait for their turn in our march to alpha. Now, we're not going to be sitting down and doing, all classes at once. So it's like we have a class section, and then we do all the classes, left at one time. We've broken them down into chunks of implementation. The monk and the ranger and the summoner are the next three on deck, because they represent the most complicated of the remaining class-oriented gameplay mechanics and systems to support them. And so we want to get those done sooner than later, because we want to have time to address issues and difficulties that may come up from trying to implement and work through those complex systems. We don't want to save the most complex systems for when we're getting really close to when we want to get alpha out there and then have to scramble.
The monk, the ranger, and the summoner are coming up next for testing. Super excited about that. I know a lot of you are as well. I know there's a lot of people in my community looking forward to playing one of these three. I know the summoner's been a very hot topic. And if you remember my interview with Ben Dean, he said that the summoner was one that was going to be very complicated because it's a pet class. But one thing for sure, once these are released into testing, it's going to be a game changer for all kinds of reasons, but I'm super looking forward to that. But later in the interview, they went into more information about the implementation of these three classes, so let's hear a little bit on that.
I think the most time-consuming thing for the ranger, this is exciting to talk about a little bit because we haven't talked about this much. So if you followed the development and you were around or saw any of the streams with the earlier PA sessions like PA 1 through 4, you probably saw a glimpse of the beckoning mechanic for the ranger. And that is the ability in combat, a couple of abilities that keyed off of certain animals that they could beckon in combat to do an attack or various things. And it came with mixed reviews because, in our defense a little bit, like we're talking about, not having like a VFX person at the time to actually make something that looked good, and so we had to use some pretty animations and an animal that kind of poofed in and out. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, number one, there is a system associated with this that is really exciting to me, and so rangers are not pet classes, and I think everybody understands that. They don't have a persistent pet that goes around with them and whatnot, but what they do have is the beckoning system, and what that enables them to do is you can liken it to something like a pet, like a hunter in World of Warcraft, with the way that they at least in the classic era. I'm not super familiar with how it works for them now, but in the classic era you would go out and find different animals that you wanted as a pet, because of their aesthetic, but also because back then they had specific abilities, different attacks and different abilities that they had. And so you would kind of develop a small repertoire of animals that you would use your pets. The beckoning system will work in a similar way, except it's not to harness like a persistent pet that you use in combat, but it's to kind of collect these different various different animals who will be able to provide you a specific kind of ability in combat. So for example, the Pantheress is an animal that you could, befriend and essentially recruit as an animal that is willing to be beckoned by you in combat. And that Pantheress would then, if beckoned in combat, would have a specific ability that is unique to the Pantheress that they would use in combat. And so if you wanted, an execute type ability, then you would go out and search for the different types of creatures and animals in the world that you would be able to befriend and would allow you to beckon it in combat based on the animals that had that type of ability. Similarly, if you were looking for, a short duration stun, for example, you might go out and befriend a Thunderpaw to be able to beckon in combat for that. I love it as a system because of how it creates that horizontal depth. I mean, collectibles are awesome in these games in the sense that not collectibles like novelty collectibles or things like that, but
Yeah.
it's that I'm progressing my character and I'm fleshing out my ability as a character by spending time accumulating these various whatever it may be, and especially when those systems ring so true with the flavor and the identity of the class. And for the Ranger, I knew from the beginning that I did not want the Ranger to be a pet class. I wanted to put the emphasis much more on their archery and their close combat, range melee combat, and the relationship and the flow between those two things, and that really being the primary kind of focus of their combat prowess and their ability arsenal. But I love this as kind of a companion to that, in the way that it deepens that by giving them that sovereignty over how they want to incorporate that aspect of their flavor of the class, the Ranger, and their affinity with animals, and then but keeping the focus on that very DPS oriented offensive based class. So I'm super excited about it. I mean, yeah, so like animation wise, the monk is finished. Ranger animations are being developed as we speak. The summoner pets, the Archimentals, need to be modeled and animated, but those will share an animation suite. As far as like underlying foundational systems and code work, the monk is finished. The Ranger is 90% finished. The pet system is spec'd, it's sanity checked, it's passed the feasibility checks and slated for implementation. So we're really close with the pet system as far as it, moving into that focused state for implementation. And again, I just want to reiterate, like these are very complex systems, and so they are going to take a bit of time. And the reason we're doing them first is for that exact reason, because they will take some time to get right. But also because these, the monk with several of its ability types, the Ranger with the ranged combat, and the beckoning system, and the summoner, primarily with the pet system, and not just a basic pet system, but the plan for the summoner where the pets are really more of like an extended character that you control and govern and progress. They have their own stats, they have their own equipment, their own paper doll inventory that you manage, and they're a very deep pet system. And so these are three complex classes that are taking some time, but it should be understood that why they're taking that time. And then you have to understand too, we're prioritizing them in this stage because we get so much content and encounter, functionality coverage flowing from these classes. I mean, just bringing the ranged combat system online, and just imagine, like, anytime you want to have any NPCs that are, archery based, or even throwing type weapons. I mean, that's such a massive slice of content potential.
Very awesome, and a lot of beans there for the Ranger and the Summoner specifically, and it sounds really awesome. I mean, the whole paper doll thing with the pet, with your Archamental, with the Summoner, and all the things he talked about with the Ranger, and their beckon skill, and going out and collecting different animals and different skills that they can use. Fantastic, absolutely cool. Can't wait for that. That's going to be a lot of fun for Rangers. But let's move on to the next thing, and that would be the perception system and the class synergy, which Joppa goes on to explain how important that is and a big differentiator between other MMOs and Pantheon. Let's hear what he had to say.
It's difficult to fully express how important they are. I truly believe we're game making in a different age. We're presenting to a population of fans and broader community with a different mindset. Even at these early stages of development, there's just been too many flops, too much vaporware, too many scams. The expectations, they're just really high. These systems that are core to the experience of playing Pantheon, the things that really make up the very heart and soul, the DNA, and what sets them apart from what's going to set us apart from our peers. These types of systems, you just really can't put a value on how important they are to a successful alpha, both in conveying to the people who have waited as long as they will have waited to experience that this is their home. Like, this is the game that they will be making their home. And then how inevitably, even with an NDA, impressions travel. They just do. And so we just have to take that very seriously.
And that's very true, because things like these two things, class synergy and perception, being something that, well, I mean, the perception system is kind of new. That's kind of a new concept in an MMO for sure in the way that they're implementing it. But the class synergy is something that used to exist in MMOs that kind of been taken away from for convenience sake, which kind of made classes lose their identity. So this has always been very important to Pantheon, and from the ground up, this is how they built the game, for those things to matter, and it's very important that they get it right. And of course, testing and all that kind of thing really helps them with that, and being able to fine-tune it, etc. Now, of course, there's a lot to this video, so if you want to hear the whole thing, I'll have it in the description down below for the full interview between Kilson and Joppa. But I'm going to split this into two parts, because there's so much here. So we'll go into Houdini and all the other things that Joppa wanted to cover in tomorrow's video, because I just don't like making super long videos, to be honest, because a lot of my audience, that's what they enjoy, is being able to keep up to date without having to spend hours for the full interview. So we'll cover the rest tomorrow. I hope you join me for that. I hope you enjoyed the video today. A lot of really good information here. Really excited about Pantheon and its development and moving into alpha stage. And don't forget, as Joppa had mentioned in some of these clips I played, that they are going to be doing a road to alpha stream here very soon, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And of course, I'll cover that in full detail as well. Hope you enjoyed the video today. Leave me a comment down below about all the things that Joppa discussed, any information, anything you want to talk about. Let's do that down below, and of course, throw me a like. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you're not already subscribed and you love Pantheon, or you just found out about Pantheon, you're in the right place, because I've got over 300 videos talking about Pantheon. Plenty of content for you to dive straight into, with the playlist of all that content, so you can watch it and binge it back to back. Hope you enjoyed the video today, guys, and until next time, God bless and happy gaming.